Disney is said to be what dreams are made of.
Except we didn't think these dreams were actually nightmares.
From finding out tragic backstories of some Disney movies, we had to make a list because almost all movies have a darker tale attached to it.
We're your hosts Andrew and Aaron, and here are your top 10 scary backstories from Disney movies.
Number 10. The Little Mermaid. Disney has massively altered the original grim dark fable by Hans Christian Andersen, published in 1837. In the book, the nameless mermaid enters into a terrible pact. She allows her tongue to be cut out by a sea witch in exchange for legs. The witch ends up getting the Little Mermaid's sweet singing voice in return. Almost like the Disney version, but far worse. Once on land, the act of walking is extremely painful for the Little Mermaid, and the prince sees her as a kind of mute pet. She falls in love with him, but in the end, he marries someone else. The Little Mermaid learns her lesson and dies of a broken heart.
At a number 9 spot, we have Pinocchio. Pinocchio is a story of a wooden doll who is brought to life with the help of his friend Jiminy Cricket. Oh yeah, and if you haven't lived under a rock, you would know that when he lies, his nose gets bigger. Despite being a movie filled with good-hearted acts and heartfelt moments, the original story behind Pinocchio is much darker than that. The original writer Carlo Collodi had initially created the story of Pinocchio for Italian newspapers to show kids what would happen to them if they chose to act in any sort of rebellious way. In his iteration of Pinocchio, the doll is portrayed as a rebellious and annoying kid who is constantly being tortured in the story just for being bad. And for his green buddy, Jiminy Cricket, well, he was in the story as well and was giving Pinocchio some good advice, all until Pinocchio got mad and decided to smash him with a mallet. And an even darker twist to the tale, Pinocchio ends up being hung for the bad deeds he has committed. If we all knew about this, maybe the growing nose would not be as famous as it was.
Number 8. Snow White. In Little Snow White, as the original story was called, the evil queen asks the hunter to take Snow White into the forest to kill, as happens also in the movie. In the original version, the child is also only 7 years old, as opposed to Disney's 14-year-old. Neither seems old enough to consider marriage though. In the grim version, the queen orders the huntsman to bring back Snow White's internal organs, saying, "Kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and liver back to me." He kills a boar instead and brings back the queen the boar's lungs and liver, which the queen thinks belongs to Snow White and so promptly eats. The cook had to boil them with salt, and the wicked woman ate them, supposing that she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. Snow White and the prince fall in love and get married even though Snow is only 7 years old, and the queen attends their wedding where she is met with her punishment of dancing to death. They put on a pair of iron shoes into burning coal, and they were brought forth with tongs and placed before her. She was forced to step into the red hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead.
At number 7 spot, we have the Hunchback of Notre Dame. This beloved Disney movie is set in 15th century Paris and follows the lives of a deformed bell ringer of Notre Dame Cathedral and his love interest La Esmeralda, who is a French Roma girl. This story with two physically appearing polar opposites combines tragedy with love and makes for a pretty good story in the end. But as for the others on this list, don't be deceived by the flashing lights and emotional stories, because its original depiction is one of the worst. The original story by Victor Hugo ends well for absolutely nobody in the movie. See, in the movie where Quasimodo and Frollo both fall in love with Esmeralda, but in Victor's story, Frollo frames Esmeralda for attempted murder and she gets sentenced to death by hanging. In both the movie and original story, Quasimodo beats Frollo, but in the original story, he gets pushed off a building because he's laughing hysterically at Esmeralda being hanged.
Number 6. We have Cinderella. We all know the classic story of Cinderella, but Cinderella doesn't actually have a fairy godmother. Rather, she plants a tree by her mother's grave and prays under it every day. She wears her dress to wear to each ball under the tree, and she's still helped by animals, though specifically birds, not mice. Also, she doesn't just lose her shoe because she's in a rush. The clever prince covers the steps in a pitch to make her stick to them, but she only loses a shoe in the process. One of Cinderella's evil stepsisters cuts off her toe and the other cuts off her heel so they can both fit into the tiny glass slipper. The prince is notified by the little doves that there's blood on the shoe, and he finally discovers the true owner is Cinderella. Once the stepsisters realize that, they try to favor Cinderella. They attend her wedding only to have their eyes pecked out by the little birds.
Right in the hump of our list, we have Pocahontas. This Disney movie portrays Pocahontas as being a free-willed woman whose best friend is a raccoon and her dad is a chief for her native tribe. The English arrive looking for gold and to claim territory, while Pocahontas finds her lover John, trying to bring peace to both sides. Classic native and early settler stuff, you know? And in the end of the movie, Pocahontas decides to stay with her tribe instead of going to England with John. However, the real story behind this is much more differently, so hopefully this doesn't ruin your childhood. In the original story, Pocahontas was never in love with John. In fact, she hated him with her guts because he would lie about everything that happened between the two. As mentioned in the movie, when John asked for Pocahontas to come back with him to England, she declines. But in the original story, John gets taken aback from this rejection, and this would ultimately lead to the Anglo-Powhatan Wars between the settlers of Virginia Colony and the Algonquin Indians. Pocahontas would then get kidnapped and forced to indulge in English culture like Christianity and the English language. After a bit of time, she went back to her tribe in Virginia, but got really sick and passed away at the young age of 21. I told you I'd ruin it.
Number 4, Sleeping Beauty. In Giambattista Bastile's tale, which is the actual origin of Sleeping Beauty, a king happens to walk by Sleeping Beauty's castle and knocks on the door. When no one answers, he climbs up a ladder through a window and he finds the princess and calls her. But as she's unconscious, she does not wake up. He carries her to the bed and abuses her, then leaves. She awakens after she gives birth because one of her twins sucked the flax from the spindle out of her finger. The king comes back and they end up falling in love. However, the king is still married to someone else. His wife finds out and not only tries to have the twins killed, cooked, and fed to the king, but also tries to burn the princess at stake. Luckily though, she was unsuccessful. Then the king and the princess get married and they live happily ever after.
At our number 3 spot, we have Mulan. Mulan follows a young Chinese woman who looks to extend her boundaries and willingly disguises herself as a man to join the army to prove to her family and to herself that she can do anything she wants. In the war, she ultimately saves her father's life and brings honor to her family. After being told for over 1,500 years, the story has gotten extremely sugar-coated. Now in Hua Mulan's original poem, that which the movie is based on, it had them losing the war completely. The Khan allowed Mulan to live, but only if she lives with him, basically making her his own slave. So in the poem, she's as cunning as in the movie, and upon hearing this, she manages to escape and run back home. When she comes back home, however, she is met with the news that her father had passed away when she was gone and that her mother had remarried. The Khan then sends out men to find her, and as she finds no other solution to this problem, she takes her own life in order to be with her dad.
At number 2, we have Tangled. Tangled, it's a pretty loose adaptation of Rapunzel, but she ends up getting knocked up by the prince before they escape, and the evil sorceress figures it out. The sorceress cuts off Rapunzel's hair and throws her out into the wilderness. When the prince shows up to see her, the sorceress dangles Rapunzel's cut off hair to lure him in and tells him that he'll never see Rapunzel again. He ends up jumping out the window in despair and is blinded by the thorns below. He wanders around aimlessly, and Rapunzel ends up giving birth to twins, and he's eventually guided back to her when he hears her voice. Her tears restore his sight, then they return to the prince's kingdom and live happily ever after.
At our number 1 spot, we have Peter Pan. Peter Pan is about a magical boy who can fly without wings and fight without weapons. He travels from the Enchanted Isle of Neverland and various locations, all while being chased by his arch nemesis, Captain Hook. This movie is based on the story of J.M. Barrie. Peter Pan was actually based off of Barry's older brother, David. After an ice skating accident, his older brother David would tragically pass away, so he created Peter to keep the image of his brother alive. And he created the island of Neverland as a place for his brother to go to. This would have a lot of dark implications for the movie because Peter would always want to bring Wendy and her brothers to Neverland, and if Neverland is a place to go after you pass away, he's basically asking them to join him in the afterlife. Well, these are the top 10 scary backstories from Disney movies. What do you guys think about our list of Disney movies?
Leave a comment below and let us know some recommendations, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
We're your hosts Andrew and Aaron, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.